What's up YouTube, this is LDS Reliance. When I shot my video series Solar Power for Beginners, one of the most common questions that I got over and over was, can I connect my inverter directly to the batteries? Because in my video I showed that I had my inverter connected to the load side of the charge controller. To answer that, let's talk about how to keep a lead acid battery healthy. You never want to discharge a lead acid battery below 20% charge, ever. So that's about between 10.8 and 11.3 volts depending on who you ask. Every time you discharge the battery below that, you're damaging the battery and shortening its lifespan. So what does that have to do with the question? Well, let's look at the specifications of a really nice inverter, and most of them are very similar to this. But this one will disconnect the voltage at 10 volts DC, which is well below what we just showed, is well below the safe zone of discharging your battery. So if you were to connect this inverter directly to the battery and you were just to leave it alone and just run your loads, this inverter would actually harm your battery. So the reason why I don't recommend this setup, for at least not for beginners, is because there's no protection on your battery, at least not protecting it from over discharging. The charge controller, if you connect it through the load terminal of the charge controller, will provide some protection, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is the way that I recommend that beginners connect their system, where you have the load, or what you're trying to power with your system, connected to the solar charge controller. And what the charge controller is going to do, it has a feature called low voltage disconnect, which will automatically disconnect the power from the battery when it reaches a safe level, which is higher than the safe level of the inverter. As you can see here, the low voltage disconnect for a charge controller is higher at about 11.5. I've actually seen some that are more like 12, but that's more of a safe zone for your battery than it is with the inverter, which is typically about 10 volts. So here's another possible way to connect, where you've got your inverter connected directly to the battery and you've got certain 12 volt loads directly connected to the charge controller. Again, you're going to need to monitor the battery or provide some protection for the battery, because the inverter is not going to adequately protect your battery. However, if you do it that way, you still probably want to buy a separate device called a low voltage disconnect and wire it in there. However, make sure that the low voltage disconnect voltage is high enough to keep your battery safe. This one in the picture is actually not. So for intermediate users, or for people just curious about why you wouldn't want to do it this way, and there is a very big reason, here's some simple math for you. Typically a smaller charge controller is a 20 amp unit, and if it's providing 12 volts, that means that you can only provide 240 watts from the load side of your inverter. That's not very much. That's not terribly useful. I mean, it's great for lights, it's great for maybe recharging power tool batteries and doing some light things, but you're not going to be able to power a whole heck of a lot with 240 watts. What you can do is you can connect your inverter directly to the battery and get a whole lot more amps than just the 20 amps, and that's why someone may not want to connect directly to the charge controller and get that extra protection. Anyway, hopefully this clears some things up for you guys. Thanks for watching.